carry on. Russell Todd ydy fy'n wy. My name is Russell Todd, one of the founding members of Expo Bangor. Croeso nôl I bawb sydd wedi ymuno ni ddwy am yr tair sesiwn cyntaf. Gyda Martin Johns, Penny Miles ac fanzines, sawl o fanzines a llenyddiaeth cefnogwyr yng Nghymru. Thank you to everyone who joined us yesterday for the 3 opening sessions with Martin Johns, Dr. Penny Miles, Professor Martin Johns, Dr. Penny Miles, and several of the fanzines from around Wales and the fan literature. Mark joined us for that. Grateful for Mark's attendance again from France, where he's with the FAW. We'll hand over to Andy Walsh in a moment from the Football Supporters Association, who's going to chair the event. But just wanted to say a quick word of thanks to those who have supported and sponsored us this week. In particular, Indycube, who are sponsoring this particular session, a community benefit society that works to support independent workers and precarious workers in Wales and beyond. Very proud of their Welsh roots. It's founded over 10 years ago by Mark Hooper. Mark was also one of the founding members, I believe, of the Cardiff City Supporters Trust as well, although tends to be seen more on the terraces of Mark, close your ears, Merthyr Town, rather than Cardiff anymore. But you know, big football fan as well, member of Walgor, the Red Wall as well. They also campaign around issues related to precarious work and insecure work, in particular 4-day working week or a shorter working week, as well as basic income. So really grateful to Indycube. Also to the FAW Trust, I think I've seen Nick drop by as well, Nick Davidson, and to the FAW themselves, also to RTS Cymru, Royal Television Society, Cymru Wales, and Llenyddiaeth Cymru, Literature Wales, and Gall Cymru, the Welsh Football Supporters Charity. The chat will be open for you all to contribute comments, wisdom, reflections. We'll collate questions as well. Feel free to contribute to that in Welsh neu yn y Gymraeg. Mae Tim a fi yn gallu cyfieithu ar gyfer pawb arall sydd di-Gymraeg. We can translate for those who don't speak Welsh. And keep you on mute for the time being at the very least. I'm very grateful to have Matt from Bangor 1876 and Mark, as I said, from Merthyr Town. They'll be able to say a little bit more about themselves and their clubs in due course. Tim, you've got a particular connection as well as an interest in this topic of fan ownership, club ownership, as again, like Mark, founding member of the Cardiff City Supporters Trust.
Yes, I think the fact that we're actually having this conversation is a victory in itself. If you go back 20, 30 years, the idea of fans owning clubs, let alone professional football clubs, was pie in the sky. But it's a tribute to people like Andy Walsh, Supporters Direct, and latterly the Football Supporters Association, that we are actually now seeing a growth, a continued growth in the number and the sustainability of supporter-owned, community-owned football clubs. And look no further than Bury if you want to see why it's important that clubs do have proper representation. They're not only sustainable, but they're actually responsible for what they do. Andy is the FSA's head of community ownership. But equally importantly, he's actually done the job himself. He was a founder of FC United of Manchester and was their general manager. And if you think, well, you know, where are they in the leagues? This club has 5,000 plus members and they're raising millions of pounds through community share offers. So this can work. And I hope what we're going to see today is the success of this model of community ownership in Wales, in the clubs we've mentioned, Bangor City, 1876, Merthyr Town, Newport, and then perhaps to look a little bit further at what's happened at Wrexham, where the trust model may not necessarily be the be-all and end-all. So with that, Andy, thank you very much for joining us. Over to you.
Diolch, Tim. Diolch, Russell. That's the end of my Welsh, I'm afraid. I want to welcome everybody as well to this session. I think it's hugely important, and thank Russell, Tim, and the team for setting this up. As Tim's mentioned, I'm the head of community ownership and the national game, and I also have a lead role for women's football at the Football Supporters Association. The session today is looking at the experience of owning a football club in Wales, but it'd be quite wrong to set off without looking at the immediate context that we find ourselves in. In recent weeks, we've seen how private ownership can lead to the gross exploitation of the support that we and generations of supporters have built up over the years for personal gain. And that's really what the ESL, the European Super League project, was all about. It was all about personal gain, and it wasn't about the sport. Community-owned football clubs are firmly established with a purpose of providing benefit to the wider community. And the model that we sponsor as the Football Supporters Association has been established for over 20 years now, with over 40 clubs in community ownership. 4 of those in Wales, and 2 are with us at the moment, 1876 Bangor, who will give you their story shortly, followed by Merthyr, who will also got an interesting tale to tell. And we're hoping we're going to be joined by Newport County as well, but many of you will have noticed the busy week they've had, the painfully busy week they've had, to lose in the 106 minutes to a penalty in the playoff finals. Can't come much more painful. And we want to try and see today, listen to people's questions. Hopefully we can give some answers to the questions that are raised. We've got other clubs that the other clubs that are in Wales that are in community ownership include Tom Pentre, and lately Merthyr Town are also being established as a community-owned club. So without any further introduction from me, I would just like to ask Matt, if from 1876 Bangor, if you could please just explain to everybody how your club was established and what it means to football fans in Bangor to have a community-owned football club.
Right, I've got a slideshow to show everyone as a bit of a help to explain our story. So hopefully it'll work. Can we all see that?
Yeah, we can see that, Matt.
Okay, right. So as you can see, a short history of a new football club. So I tried to make it the same font, so I've got a bit of a design thing there. Right, first slide. Here's the basics. We were founded nearly 2 years ago exactly. Just over, actually, because 2 years ago yesterday is when we had to apply to become members of the FAW. So we're 2 years old. And then our home ground is Treborth Playing Fields in part of the Bangor University complex. If you've been to Bangor, it's near one of the bridges, the older bridge, Telford's Bridge. And the name, as you can see there, that's from the Bangor Walk of Fame, I think you could call it. It's the historic moments of this that have happened in the city of Bangor going back thousands of years. The name comes from the first club that was founded in the city. And then the badge there, as you can see, there's our club badge. Well, if you look around Bangor on the ironwork available on the pier and other places, and various gates and various council property, it's the city coat of arms. So as you can see, the 2 stars and the mace and the knight's helmet and things like that. So there's the basics. This is how we started. Basically, the club started as a result of a public meeting that was held in April 2019. And it was arranged by the Bangor City Supporters Association. And the way it started was 2 important votes were held during that meeting. As you can see, the first was to incorporate the BCSESA as a community benefit society. And the second one was to found the new club. And therefore, there's, as you can see, 2 things happened as a result of the meeting. The BCSESA incorporated the CBS, and 1876 were formed or founded. And so here's a bit more detail. At the meeting, it was decided that the new trust, the CBS, would run the new club. And then because that had a CBS model in effect, so did the club, the new club. And then the committee that was there in the meeting became the committee that made the new club a reality. And we'd done a bit of groundwork beforehand because there'd been talk of people being dissatisfied with the situation. So we already had contacts with a possible ground management team and a kit supplier and things like that. So that was more like formalising the decision to move forward quite quickly, because after the meeting, we only had about 6 to 8 weeks to organise the club. So there was a lot of work done quite quickly. And David Hughes, our club secretary, did a lot of that work. So thankful to David for doing that. And this is the story going back a bit further. So it started basically when Bangor City was relegated from the Welsh Premier League for failing a licence. But it's the Supporters Association as well, the BCSESA, had a major part to play in how the club started. They were a major shareholder in Bangor City, and because of the situation with the licensing, there was a lot of, shall we say, tension and upheaval and upset in the situation. But at the same time, we had trouble motivating people to get involved. So, as you can see, between April and June of that year, the SA was mothballed, basically, because generally people weren't willing to come forward to be part of the committee. But then, by October, enough people had decided we need to restart the SA again. So we started it at a public meeting in the Crosville Club in Bangor, and then the member decided that basically we should protect our shareholding. That was we were the major shareholder in the Bangor City. And then after that meeting, we had another 4 or 5 meetings, public meetings in various places in Bangor, and then democratic decisions were taken. For example, one was to obtain legal advice from legal sources, and one was to contact supporters direct, as it was called then, now the FSA. And the other vote we took was to incorporate BCSC to protect the shareholding that we had, and also to farm the new club. So to go a bit further into that, and why it was necessary to form a new club, is because by April 2019, the meeting that caused the club to exist, the situation was very stark in the city. We didn't know what was happening with Bangor City, and we feared, because the licence had been a failure, and they'd been demoted the previous April, and there were so many unpaid bills, and the crowds were falling, and the atmosphere wasn't particularly conducive to people sorting situations out, that we feared that there would be no club by the next season. And then the second problem there is, because we feared no club, there was only, as I already said, 6 to 8 weeks to start a new club. So we had to make quick decisions, and and that's why we called the meeting. And we got the support of everybody, well, let's say 95% of the people at the meeting, to form the new club. And we, as in the process of trying to put forward that idea, as I've already said, we made connections with people to have some kind of basis to start from. And then after the meeting, we firmed up those plans and those ideas. So that's where we're up to April 2019 now. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind since then, as you can imagine. Oh, sorry. And then we get to June 2019 and we'd applied, so that's 2 years ago yesterday. And then we had the open day, which brought people back together. And this is where people started to come back together, basically. The open day, and we saw people we hadn't seen for a few months or a couple of years. So that was it was already good to start there, sort of bringing people together there. And then people, at that open day, people could become members of the trust. And also the new kit was unveiled in public and people could buy that. And then we had the big day 2 weeks later, where we played our first ever match against FC United. Lost 12-1, but that didn't really matter. And the enjoyment of the day was fantastic. Everybody enjoyed themselves. We made so many friends that day, and it was like a happy bus on the way home, a drunk happy bus, I must say. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, we started our new season, which was in the Gwynedd League. And as you can see there's 6 tiers in the North Wales football pyramid, and the Gwynedd League is the 5th tier. So that was things progressing. So, as we were now a fan-owned club, we've made the following fan-owned decisions at the club. Well, the first one's obvious. We started the club because of a democratic decision, because our fans created it. Then the second thing was to come up with a name. So we asked our members to come up with a new name via email poll. And 1876, Bangor 1876 was the most popular one. And then as we registered with the FCA, we were able to admit members. And so they paid £1 for a share. And as you can see there, the share entitled our members to be able to do the following three things. So it was elect the society's first board and approve the society's first set of rules. And then that was the first AGM in 2019. And here's where our story gets a bit sort of fractious. We had our second AGM about 6 months into the first lockdown. So we had an AGM and we held it basically in our stadium, on our ground, but it was very socially distanced and wasn't that many people there, but at least we had an AGM. So we scrutinised and approved our accounts, and then we voted for our name change, that we're now the Bangor Football Supporters Society Limited. And then we also amended our rules to acknowledge that. And also the last thing, the fans have been able to volunteer to help their club. So these are the basics of our fan-owned identity, basically. And here's some community relations that we've been involved in. Our sister club, the Club Peldroed Merthyr Bangor, affiliated almost straight away. And we've also become a registered junior club. We have some age group teams, including some with local community links. There's one from the Maesg area of Bangor that's affiliated to us. Over the last 6 or 7 months, we've had fun football sessions when the lockdown regulations have allowed. And we've also supported members of our squad which wish to gain coaching qualifications. And our future plans, we've also got those as well. We hope to create a tangible pathway for our younger age group right up to the first team. And then is quite an exciting programme. We wear the same shirt, which is basically to do with mental health. So hopefully we will start resuming that when lockdown regulations are finally over. But we have to wait and see about that, obviously. And here's a community relations in general. So we've been fairly successful from a football point of view. So that's enabled us to have a high profile within the community, especially with our social media presence, which was started by Kevin and then has been continued by David and Jonathan, and a little bit of my work as well have been involved. And the concept of a part owner of the football club seems to be appealing. We currently have a database of over 800 supporters. We've got excellent links with the university. Well, we use their facilities, and their support has been fantastic and been really, really, I can't emphasise that enough. The club sponsors have been closely involved as well, and some of them actually come to matches regularly. It is quite an important one for our local area. Most of our public communications are fully bilingual, and then some of the content has been exclusively in Welsh, which is obviously quite important to reflect our local area. And here's some of our concrete examples of our community-oriented activities. So as you can see, we've been involved with charities. yw'n is a local charity that's involved with the NHS. The Lily Foundation was a link encouraged by one of our owners. We've organised collections for food banks, particularly the one in Bangor Cathedral. And as we've noted, the fun football sessions have created opportunities for inclusive football. Fun football is not about trying to get players necessarily for the academy teams or the age group teams. It's just to encourage access to the game of football. And then over the last few weeks, we've talked about designated specific help for certain charities, and we'll be launching an initiative for that in due course, dependent on the regulations, of course. And so here's our playing record. So we originally placed, as I already said, tier 5, sorry. We've got a locally based squad, which was a decision we wanted to make to, take a local approach, including relatively famous names from the city's recent football history. League record, well, it's perfect, basically 100% record in the league. The cup record, we progressed through 3 or 4 rounds of the Welsh Cup, including a victory over a team from 2 leagues above. And we also progressed to the second round of the FA Trophy, which is like the FA Trophy in England, basically. It's a second cup competition. And we remained in all local cups until the season was curtailed. And along the way, we managed to attract one of the highest average crowds in certainly in North Wales, and perhaps even in the whole of Wales. Right, just to move on, here's some photos. Here's a picture from our first game, with people doing the traditional shoes off if you love Bangor. As you can see, that's our shirt there. It's comes from Bangor history. It's the shirt that was worn against Napoli, and the ubiquitous Spirit of 58 bucket hats there as well. That's our first league game. So you can see that people turned out in numbers for that. This photo was one I took, and it showed just this little interchange here between these 2 people. It shows what's our clubs engendered in people. It's like a feeling of togetherness, and you can see that there. There's local legend Les Davis, who was once named in the top 30 players of Europe about 10 years ago. And there's our fans, obviously, as you can see, that was after the cup game where we beat Pennakai, who were 2 leagues above on penalties. So, as you can see, there's the players coming off after the match. That might not look like a highlight, but it is to have your own club and to be able to go to it. So that was obviously a night game. You can see there sort of our facilities that we've got. That was an away game we had. It's our local derby. They're just in Anglesey. This was Mannau Bridge, and we're just the other side of the bridge from them. So that was quite a good day as well. As you can see, a lot of people have turned up for that one. A lot of our fans. And that was our last sort of big day out. Was Llandystumwy I think it was the Cup. So we didn't know what was going to happen there about a month later. So that's a nice little memory. And there's someone, we've left our mark on the pavilion in our home ground. It was a bit misty that day, so someone's written that on the window. That was one of our programmes, and this shows how fans can get involved, because our fans have Pete, who's now involved as our associate artist, helped to design this cover. So that's a fan sticker, I think it was made, and then that was one of the programmes we made, as you can see, North Wales Coast Cup. This is our sort of like guiding idea. Our city, our club, ein dinas, ein club. So that's a hashtag we're going to start using this season. And this is the progress we've made, basically, I'd say. Right? We've got a fan-owned club that exists in Bangor. And we not only exist, we're financially stable. And the main reason for that is our governing body is regulated by the FCA. And as we all know in football, it's important that we're regulated to make sure things are done correctly. The club facilities have passed the FAW's Tier 3 criteria for 2 successive seasons. So we've got a lot of room there to progress as well. So that's the thing. We've had 100% record in league matches, notable cup victories. But probably the most important thing is the last one, the feel-good factor. You certainly know it when it's not there. But from what I've seen over the last, well, certainly when we had matches, not so much now because of the 18 months of COVID. But it was lovely to see people coming back together. That open day I said, it was nice to see people you haven't seen for months or even years. And it was just nice to see people chatting amongst each other before matches about anything under the sun, not just football, just to meet up and have that social interaction and to indulge in the Bangor passion and moidering with each other. So that's been a little introduction to our club. If you've got any questions or anything to add, you can add them to the chat or bring them up later, I suppose.
Thanks very much. That's really helpful. Thank you, Matt. We will have time for questions. Move on to questions shortly. But if I can first ask Mark, who's vice chair at Merthyr Town, to give us a bit of an introduction to how Merthyr Town became community owned. Mark, is that okay for you? Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just going to introduce one of the person on the call. There's a gentleman on the call called Rob, who's got a fantastic moustache. Because as you can tell in Merthyr, facial hair is really important. and he's one of the board members as well. So if I go off tangent, which I tend to do, Rob's going to bring me back online and keep the message clear and succinct. And William Callahan's Barry shirt is obviously putting me off. If he can turn his camera off, that would be great as well, please. Anyway, look, our Supporters Trust was started in 2004, and it was more at the time to form a supporters unit to support the club as it was, and it wasn't formed in any sort of crisis. You know, I don't think we were very fond of the chairman at the time, but you know, the club was moving on and the club was okay. But as the years went on, and the then owner, the absentee landlord, as I often call him in these sort of discussions, his behaviour became more erratic as it got on. So, I mean, we were very clever in what we did at the time. So the trust was formed in peacetime almost. Wonderful lady called Jackie Forster. If we ever had the opportunity to meet her, she was a wonderful lady. She came down and met us a couple of times, and she's sadly missed now because she understood the non-league game. So she set us up, and we were very good. We got ourselves organised, and we had a set of principles and a democracy within that group then to make these calls. And that was really important when the shit hit the fan. Sorry, but that's the best way to put it. When the owner decided he got bored, and he just didn't want to do it anymore. And in about February, March, Rob will tell me the dates because he's good with dates and the detail. He decided not to put any money in anymore, and he just wanted to close it down. The important thing then was we were quite clever, and I still think we were maybe a unique case, and Andy may know different. We had loaned the club some money before Christmas. We were fed up of giving them money, but it was an issue. So we loaned them money. I think we loaned them about £1,700. So, and they signed it, the loan document, which was really important because in that March time then, we were able to put our own club into administration. So I think we're in a really unique position of the supporters actually putting their own club in administration to protect it from its owner. So that was a really bold move for us because a lot of supporters just wanted us to hand the money over to the owner. The money we had just hand it over, and we were solid and saying, no, there's a different way here. It was a risk. And even then, administration is not an easy thing. And Rob would have been involved with all the stuff with that because it's a tough call to make. You know, we played a year then sort of in limbo. And then in 2010, the club finally went under and we had to start again. For Merthyr's unique position in Wales, which some people in this call will not agree with, but there we are. We were very fortunate. It was the year of the massive reformation of Welsh football. So I think we were able to stay out of that and work with the FAW and the FA because we were just a problem nobody wanted in effect. And we were able to reform in the Western League. Now, with the administration and the liquidation of the old club meant that we spent a year in exile in Taff's Well, which is, everybody in this call will know what Taff's Well is. And we had a great 12 months in Taff's Well. It was really enjoyable. But luckily, we were able to move back to Penarron Park and then progress through the leagues that way then. So the important thing then was the very early days of the trust taking over. We would have almost monthly public meetings, a bit like what Matt was saying at Bangor, public meetings, encouraging people to come along. And those early ones, everybody loves a crisis. Everybody loves getting on and moaning about something. They were really good, but we set up a democratic way of doing things, you know. So, and if I jump ahead right until last season, here's one for you. Rob is one of the people who made the call to suspend us from the system. So we took the decision because we couldn't get fans in, and the English clubs could. We'll make a call through the board of directors, consult with the fans, and I was against that. And in fact, I was very loudly against that, as Rob will tell you probably, and I was wrong. But the point is, though, we had that opportunity to make our point, and then Rob's point and the directors at that time's point was, well, why don't you come on the board then if you think that? And now I am, because that's how democracy works. If you want to moan about something, you have to then stand up and go for it. So now I'm on the board now, and I understand that Rob was bang on the money and the decision was correct. It's a weird one, and actually, I think we're actually a 12-month hibernation period has actually held us in quite good stead. I think we've been able to rejig. But going back to where we were, though, the early years of that first couple of years was, I think where Matt is now is just, it's a wonderful feeling. Our first game was in Shepton Mallet, where they sell really nice cider, so it's a really great place to go. And it was a wonderful day out. I'm sure Matt was the same when his first game. It's just very emotional, very emotional. A lot of tears there because we'd actually done what we said we'd do. We'd got rid of the evil regime and we ran the place. But I wanted to make a point in this one, though. It's very easy and it's great fun being involved in a war. Everybody rallies round, but when you've got to start paying the electric bills, and people tend to drift off, and I've done that a few times over the last 11 years of the club. You know, now I'm sort of committing myself to being there. People like Rob have always been there, and you know, Rob is the man, for example, who every club needs to pay the bills, because otherwise you'll end up fighting a war, which is great fun. It's not the war. It's not the war that kills you, the clubs. It's the peace. Paying the bills, doing the right stuff, and then also trying to reinvent our club every season. You know, we've got lots of stuff going on. We've got a walk-in football team. We've got I'm not sure we've got a veterans team anymore because they move around the town. Women's team, which is in tier 2 now. We've got a lot of things going on, and it's important to keep pushing that, because if we say we're a community enterprise, so that's what we always push to our local council, who are really supportive. You have to walk the walk, and that democratic, that community, that hub, everything does give you benefits. Now, I mean, again, I keep mentioning Rob, and probably it'd be better off if Rob did this talk really, because he will have the information to hand of how we have been able to renovate our ground through grants from the EU, from Welsh Government, because of where Merthyr is. I mean, Merthyr is a deprived area. That's what it is, economically deprived. So, I mean, the football club now is a massive part of the regeneration of our town, because the facilities there now are based on community participation. So, as I said, the women's team, the walk-in football is massive in the week. And lots of, you know, people, gentlemen of a certain age, coming up and playing some football in the day, having a cup of tea. Mental health strategies during the day. We were able to hand the building over to the NHS for training when the pandemic started. So these things, you have to walk the walk, though, because you can't just say you're community owned unless you make it happen. I've gone all over the place a bit there, but I'm just going to get a feel of where we are now. Basically, trying to reinvent ourselves every year to make ourselves relevant in the town. And I think we're doing that. I think we're still no club can stand still, but the democracy of the club is probably the foundation of it all, because ultimately every fan is responsible for the club. And we have lots of, I mean, there's one great one. There's a fella who supports us who keeps on to me about us having a car boot sale. Great idea in our ground. Our ground's very big. Why not? It's a great idea. The point is that you have to do it, mate, not me. Don't tell me it's a good idea. You have to do it. And he hasn't done it, but that's fine, because that's the way we are now. If you've got a great idea, come along. We'll give you all the support you want, but you have to deliver it, because that's how our community club is now. Everybody is equal. One owner, one vote. We don't actually call out people, our members. We call them owners, because everybody is an owner, and that's very important. So I hope that's covered a general thing, and Rob hasn't shaken his head yet. So I think I've done all right, because he's the calm, sensible one. So he's the one there waiting for me to make a mistake. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. And again, thanks to Matt for that great introduction. I think everybody can see from the two contributions we've had already that the central issue about supporter ownership and community ownership is about participation. It's about the role that a football club can play in its local community. It's about establishing the club for football. We can't forget that we're about football, and it's the football that brings everybody together, but then using that to drive change and build social cohesion in the local areas. It's an important part, and it's a key theme through the whole of Expo Walgach. I think also Matt and Mark have given you a good flavour of the challenges there are in setting up a club. But most importantly, those challenges are met together. And again, it's about that participation. This is not just a consumer relationship. This is about people getting involved and building the club for themselves and not for others, but rooted in the community, a clear role in the community. And that's the model that we promote at the Football Supporters Association. It was established by people like Jackie Forster through Supporters Direct, in that the community benefit model is not just for the benefit of the supporters at the club or the people who take an interest in the club. It's for the wider benefit of society, and that's rooted within our model. There are challenges to the community-owned model, which we'd be happy to explore. And a couple of things have already come up in the chat. Questions been raised about whether the language that is used is a challenge to football fans, and sometimes it can be. People talk about director responsibilities, shareholders, legal responsibilities, and it's the job of the board members and my job at the Football Supporters Association to assist clubs in explaining that to fans, to get through that dialogue. Because if we just leave it to others who are professionals in inverted commas, then football fans will never have a real say. It's our responsibility as fans to understand these things. It's not that difficult, but we're always there to assist and to help people. And it's through those shares that we can actually control our club and actually have a say. So if anybody's got, there's a couple more questions that have already been posted. I just want to open it to the floor. Does anybody want to show their hand who wants to ask a direct question at this juncture? If Tim and Russell can help me, if I can't
I think David Collins's question was very pertinent and brings together something that I've been concerned about the supporters' ownership model. And he's used the examples of Wrexham and Wimbledon. I was just reading Ap Davidd's magazine, the Shag magazine. He said that, you know, where some clubs have succeeded, like your own, Andy, in Wimbledon, is that it's almost that there's a socialist agenda which is built into it. So you wouldn't want to expand, you wouldn't want to go up the leagues if that meant a dilution of pure community ownership. I think this goes to the crux of how far you can get along with a trust or the community ownership of a football club, and whether there is a trade-off. And I'd just be interested in what you think about that.
Well, I'll throw that to Matt and Mark first, and I can come back, because it's not just about Wrexham and Wimbledon. There's also a really good comparator with Chester as well. But I'll throw that to Matt and Mark. Matt, do you have anything to come back on that?
Yes, I found that if you explain it to some people who are sceptical, because I work in education, so I know the value of language and using the right sort of language. If you use the right sort of language with people, then they come along with you. They might have been sceptical, but then they start to realise, actually, we can do it if we work together. So from that point of view, making people aware of the situation and how they can get involved can, you know, work with just the right sort of language. But yeah, I suppose there has to be an idea at the centre to bring people along. So it could be a political thing, it could be a social thing, it could be a geographical thing. So I suppose, yeah, if you just keep an idea at the centre that people can relate to, that helps to bring people on. That's what I think, anyway.
Okay. I mean, as from a Merthyr perspective, I mean, I think it depends on what the club's fans' realistic thoughts are of where they want to be. I mean, Merthyr fans. I mean, everybody dreams of just going through the leagues and winning the European Cup. But that is a dream. That's all it is. I mean, a lot of us in Merthyr. I mean, the big thing for us is, again, non-league football, Merthyr football, is a social occasion. The Saturday is a social occasion, and how far do we want to go to change that? I spoke yesterday, and it was a bit of a joke, but it is true. One of the things that the Welsh Premier League has is that you can't drink in the ground. In Merthyr, we can, and we enjoy that. That's part of our day. You stand on the terrace with a pint and you watch the game, and it's a big thing. It is a big thing in the fan culture. So if as you move up the ladders, of course, the restrictions become more and more now. So does our fan base want to go to the Football League? I suppose you ask them from our young fans, they probably say yes. If you ask myself and possibly Rob, I've never asked him this question, we'd probably say no. I mean, we'd love to be in maybe the National League, National South, That's our area. So that's what we want to be. So do we want that huge investment? Do we need that huge investment to do that? Maybe, if it's the right investment coming towards us. But in effect, we're probably going to try and push away from it because we've been there with the sugar daddies and it didn't work for us. Ultimately, it was a disaster. So, I mean, but it's a difficult call to make, though, because it depends who the person is. If somebody local came back and we knew them and they were a fan, they won the lot, things could change. But I think we're trying to be realistic where our ambitions are, though. Our ambitions is to, if we could, would be to be, again, a really big competitive non-league team like we were in the sort of the 50s and the late 80s, early 90s. That's where the glory is if you talk about where the fan is. But it's a difficult one because, if somebody knocks the door with a bit of money, people, start dreaming of moving up maybe where we don't want to be.
Dewi Llwyd Evans wanted to talk about Wrexham because they're, in a sense, they've had to confront that question you're talking about, Mark, and have chosen to take the money. And I don't mean that in any pejorative sense. I really don't. But Dewi, it'd be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Can I also just say that Dylan's waiting to come in. So Dylan, I'll take you straight after David. Is that okay? David, go ahead, please.
Mute.
You need to unmute him, Russell, please.
That's it. I think I'm there. Yeah, thanks everyone. Really fascinating session. I don't have any special insider knowledge or anything. I'm just a fan. I was very struck by Martin John's quote yesterday in his lecture. That he was talking about a Swansea fan and the relationship with his dad and his family, and how that's all part of how the club belongs to you because it's a tradition, family. Same for me with Wrexham. My dad took me to the first game. He's passed on long since. There's a memorial brick to him in one of the stands from me. My son's now a Wrexham fan, one of the proudest things I've ever done. So it goes deep, it really goes deep. And for 50 years, I've felt that. And I'll tell you, this certificate here, which is my share certificate in the Wrexham Supporters Trust, is that time was when I felt the most belonging to that club. So even with that strong emotional attachment I had, the feeling that I also owned the club was massive. And, I can't over exaggerate that. So why 6 months ago did I vote for that club and that share to be handed over to the capitalist film industry, American and Canadian offers? And I've been challenged on that by some of my friends, and I've also challenged myself about it, because I think ultimately, if it hadn't been the Supporters Trust, if we hadn't taken over the club, there wouldn't have been a club there in a financial state which would then be taken over by private investors. So that financial probity, so apart from the emotion, that financial probity that comes from being a Supporters Trust is really important in terms of sustainability of football clubs. And again, I can't overestimate that, because I think in a sense, we're in for a roller coaster now at Wrexham. But what happened in Wrexham, I'm sure you've probably seen this from the sidelines, is the Supporters Trust model became the enemy for a large proportion of the fans. When things didn't go well on the pitch, we might have been going into the black in terms of the book, the finances and all that. But what people saw was, lack of success. Why are we having lack of success? We're not putting enough money into the team. Why is that? Oh, it's the Supporters Trust model. And that became toxic to the extreme in the last 2 years at Wrexham. And in a sense, I think that more than anything was the reason why I voted to say, okay, well, let's hand it over to to someone else for a bit. But ultimately, when they've had their fun with it all, they've done the documentary, hopefully, you know, we have some success. Ultimately, what happens next? And I think that's you know, there's still plenty of us left who will want to take the reins over if we're given that opportunity. So I don't know what that tells you. What all I suspect that the message and the moral of that is, you know, just because you're a supporters trust doesn't guarantee that people will see you as always the good guys. Ultimately, unless things happen on the pitch, people will turn against you, and that's really sad. And it, you know, there's nothing worse than fans v fans. It's horrible. Thank you.
I think Dylan's still waiting to be unmuted, Russ.
People should be able to unmute themselves. Dylan.
You're unmuted, Dylan.
Yeah, I'm muted now. I think you might have answered some of the stuff I was going to ask about anyway. I was going to talk about Wrexham, so I'm a Wrexham supporter as well. Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of it, but I think, like Debbie mentioned then, I had very mixed emotions when Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney came in. It's very exciting in a lot of ways, but also part of me feels it's retrograde, moving from a supporters own model to private ownership. And I was disappointed that we didn't have more checks and balances in place. So I know the two Hollywood stars have made a verbal commitment that when they eventually sell the club, they'll look to pass that back to the trust for some sort of pet form. But it's a verbal assurance they made on a Zoom meeting. I'm disappointed there was no kind of legally binding agreement in place from the get-go. And I'm also disappointed it was 100% ownership and we didn't retain some proportion of supporters trust ownership on that. But I voted for it because it just seemed, if it had been anybody else, if it had been somebody who owns, I don't know, a chicken factory emporium or something, I wouldn't have, but because of who they were and what we were talking about and the fact they got the ethos, I did. But there's that part of me that's quite reluctant. And like Debbie's touched on, the supporters trust has got a lot of blame unfairly, I think, over the last couple of years. And it's a lot of it seems to be down to individuals. People don't like particular individuals involved in the trust, that they haven't done a good job. But there seems to be no recognition amongst a proportion of supporters that supporters trust is a blank canvas in that it's an institution. You know, you elect the people you want to elect and they run the club how they run it, and you've always got that democratic mandate to change that structure. You know, the important thing with the supporters trust is that, you know, unlike a private individual, it's always going to have the best interests of the club, even if it's not competent for whatever reason. It's there to fulfil the function of keeping the club going on. But anyway, I'm waffling a bit here. I kind of wanted to get the view of other people outside of the Wrexham bubble and kind of what they think about it, whether they think it's a shame really that we're no longer supporters owned, and kind of, you know, whether they think there's any pitfalls along the way for us.
There's a good comment here from Carwyn. The supporters model might have limitations. The German model, 50 plus 1%, 50% plus one ownership, allows fans and investors to work, to live together. I mean, what they've got and what we haven't is that they've always had that model. We're trying to, if you like, to graft a community ownership model onto a purely capitalistic model which is established and which for the big boys simply works, doesn't it? And that's why my original question was, you know, do you have to look at what a football club is about? And I think what Mark was alluding to, it's not necessarily just about the football. You see this as a community asset, first and foremost. And success on the pitch and going up the leagues, actually, that is secondary to what we think a football should be.
I mean, I kind of just want to say another thing about it. It is a tough call to become fan owner because it is a glass ceiling, and you are competing against some, you know, other clubs who have no issues with overspending, spending too much money, and the fans can get frustrated. this is supposed to take into your beliefs, but also we need to make sure that the governments, all the governments, understand that community ownership obviously only brings in a certain amount of money. And if we are a community club, then we need to be treated in a different way. I mean, we are a non-profit organisation at Merthyr. I'm sure Bangor are as well. We put all the money back into the club. So, I mean, for example, we don't make profit. We try not to lose money. A couple of years ago, we didn't do that very well, and we had to sort of do it again. But it's very important that sort of local authorities and governments appreciate what the fan-owned clubs are trying to put together and put some in place so they've got tax breaks, the lower rates. That's going to be really important going forward, because otherwise, you know, as the Wrexham fans have said, it's very difficult when you're competing against clubs who have no issue at all with overspending. We've got clubs in our league which are villages who are spending 5 times, Rob, more than we are. You know, our budget is quite modest, but so fans can get frustrated. So, but you know, we need to look towards sort of central government to give fan-owned clubs more help to maintain themselves within the current, as Tim said, capitalist structure. What's your mind going?
I think Andy's lost his audio. Can't hear you, Andy. You're a co-host, so you should just be able to unmute yourself. But just on the question of the on Merthyr, I posted a link in it. It's a few years out of date. Well, not out of date. It's resonant still, I think. Back in 2017, I went up to Merthyr. Tim and I recorded a podcast with I think it's Elliot, isn't it, from the club at Merthyr, and you could see what was great was the extent to which it is a community asset. There were people who were playing walking football. Some of the bad language of which came through over the mic, even though they were walking. But there was a lot of focus on how the community is trying, how the club is trying to give back to and invest in the community, but also try to be invested in as well and have that reciprocity. I think you're back, Andy, yeah?
I think the Welsh model, indeed the Welsh pyramid, surely lends itself more to community ownership because of the scale, the economics of it. You can actually do it. You know, if Airbus TNS, you could actually do it, I think, and sustain it. Which comes, Mark, sadly, to Jason's question here: has Merthyr been close to coming into the Welsh pyramid?
I think having experience of most levels of the Welsh pyramid, just from going to watch, never mind being involved as a fan of a certain club, it is possible, as Tim's just said, you can have team spirit that's brought on by the club that you're reflecting can sometimes outwit money. I know it sounds like a bit of a pipe dream, but it is possible. I mean, it's not. I know it's 50 odd years ago, but Celtic managed to win the European Cup. I know it's a totally different situation, but it's not that different in terms of the Welsh Premier League now. You could have, I don't know, say Barry aren't that far away from winning it really, compared to certain other clubs. And they're the sort of more fan-orientated club than the ones that seem to be up there at the moment. So I don't think it is beyond the realms of possibility for a fan-owned club to play in the Champions League in the Welsh system.
I mean, on the Merthyr and the Welsh Premier system, I mean, we did a couple of provocative articles in the fanzine 2 years ago now. So there's always a debate within the club about the benefits and not of where we are and everything, and it's constantly being talked about. As I mentioned in the meeting yesterday, there has been discussions with the FAW on just what the benefits would be, and that remains with the club at the moment. I mean, the one thing about it is, though, it's probably a little bit more difficult for the club to join the Welsh Premier at the moment within the fan base, because the fans enjoy the position we're in now. So at board, go into the fans saying, we think this is a good proposition. We'll have to have a really, really strong idea of everything that entails to join the Welsh system to convince the fans, because they'll have to vote for it. So that's the important thing. Any major event like that, I mean, our team colours in the first year were red and green. The fans voted to go to black and white again. So that's our colours, and it won't be that's the end of the debate. That's what it is. So for us to join the Welsh system, it would be up to the fans to vote, our fans and our owners to vote on that within our constitution.
And I think that's a key element, isn't it? And we're talking about the experience to Wrexham and your decision there about whether to join the pyramid or not. It's down to the supporters, and we're in the middle of the fan-led review at the moment being conducted by Tracy Crouch, and one of the key demands that we're making as a Football Supporters Association is for a regulator of the game, so that clubs' decisions reflect those of the supporters and those who care most about the club, and not just at the whim of an owner, which brings us back to the beginning, which is about the Super League, where people who acquire the stocks and shares can make decisions for football clubs that have been built up over generations and ignore the views of supporters. And that's got to be challenged. That's got to be checked. And community ownership gives that. I would also, because obviously I lost audio a short time ago, just wanted to make another point on the Wrexham issue. Nobody was more disappointed than me that Wrexham came out of supporter ownership. But one of the things that I think both Dylan and Dowie made very well earlier is that without supporter ownership, the club wouldn't exist. The club was able to stabilise its finances. They built relationships with the local authority, with the Senedd, and there were plans in place for new training ground, redevelopment of the Cop End, all put in place by the supporters and by the supporter ownership. Fans got frustrated over a couple of years with lack of progress on the pitch, and that is disappointing that then led to a change of ownership. And we tried very hard to get the new owners to agree to community ownership, but they just refused, and to a buyback option, but they just refused. So I think we've got lots of lessons to learn as supporters. We've been doing this now for 20 years or so. There's 40 odd clubs that are in community ownership. There's a long way for us to go. There's more lessons for us to learn, but I think we're in a stronger position now than we have been for a long time. And we're hoping that that more supporters and more clubs see the benefit of community ownership, and we can establish more community owned clubs, not just in Wales, but across Europe as well. I'm conscious that we're now over time, and people will have to go. So, in drawing remarks to a conclusion, I'd ask you just to have a look at the chat. Russell's posted a link to a podcast about Merthyr that was done a couple of years ago, and there's more information about community ownership on our website, thefsa.org.uk. If people want to contact me, then they can do so directly. If you've got my email address, which is on our website, or via Russell or Tim, I'm more than happy for people to be given my email address. You can make contact. We've only just really scratched the surface today, and hopefully we can have further discussions in the future. So thank you all very much. Thanks to Russ and Tim for hosting the session, and good luck with the rest of the event.
Thanks, Andy. Diolch fawr. Yeah, like you said, only scratch the surface. I think it's such a current topic, not least given what's happened at Wrexham, but also things like the ESL and things like that. So there's only so much you can cram into these sort of short sessions. I'll make sure that the contacts and the links you've just referred to are circulated to everyone as well. Apologies just for overrunning a little bit. We try to keep the time to all of these as far as possible. Thank you to Matt. Thank you to Mark. Best of luck tonight, Mark. Less than an hour now, we have Jamie Grundy joining us to talk about how football plays a critical role in rehabilitating and helping prisoners coming to the end of sentences to readjust to returning to society, basically. He spent the season with Perchnogaeth FC, the only prisoner football team in Wales, a couple of years ago. He wrote a book called 90 Minutes of Freedom, the title of which will become very apparent if you listen to Jamie. That's at 2:30. You should all have the links. If not, any problems, get in touch, and hopefully we'll see you then. But thanks once again, Matt, Mark, and Andy.
Thank you.
Diolch.
Diolch.